Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by the Arizona Office of Tourism. This spring, follow your favorite baseball teams to Arizona for Cactus League spring training. Amazing weather and landscapes, exciting outdoor adventure, incredible food. Arizona is the perfect home base for baseball fans. Plan your spring training getaway at visitarizona.com/spring training. Yes, that's visitarizona.com/spring training. And now here's our show.
Oh, there is no joy for senior baseball fans in Southwest Florida today. The Fort Myers Sun Sox have stepped to the plate for the last time. The team folded this morning halfway through its second season. Wink Sports Director Ken Tomesh has been following the story all morning. Ken, what happened here?
Well, Marisa, like almost everything in sports these days, senior baseball is a business as well as a game, and the business today just plain ran out of money. The Sun Sox had one more Christmas surprise waiting for them when they came back from their holiday break this morning, but this one was definitely not on anyone's wish list. The team packed it in and packed it up today, leaving the players out at home.
I guess that's it.
In fact, that is it for the Sun Sox, and most likely for Senior League Baseball, too. When players reported to Terry Park this morning, they were told the team had suspended operations. Many of them had gone home for Christmas vacation and were on their way to Daytona Beach, where the Sox were to play the Explorers tomorrow. That made for a quick round of phone calls.
Dan Roan is up in Alpena, Michigan, and he was headed to the airport and had already left his home and talked to his father, and his father was fortunately able to get a hold of him at the airport and not have him come back.
The big mystery on this day after Christmas is the Grinch who stole Michael Graham. No one knows exactly where the Sun Sox owner is, but reportedly a money dispute between Graham and two of his co-owners led to the team closing up shop this morning. Now that the Sox have folded and it looks like the Senior League will follow, the players are left feeling a lot like this deserted ballpark. Empty.
It appalls me that they bring us down here to play, to play baseball. I mean, they cut it down from 3 months to 2 months and cut the salary caps and what have you. And we agreed to everything. We just want to have fun and play.
I think all the players will be disappointed because, first of all, it was a lot of fun, and it also gave players something to do when they were out of the game. And we were hoping that it would continue, but it looks like it's not.
Most of the players agree senior baseball was a good concept that just struck out. When the league was formed some 19 months ago, it was seen as a way for the boys of summer to enjoy some more winters in the sun. But the winters quickly turned to discontent as teams moved and folded and big-name players and fans stayed away. These guys' biggest complaint is the way the whole thing was handled.
I don't blame them at all, to say I can't lose that type of money, but don't start the season at all. Really? I mean, some of these guys took off their work, and now they have to go back and start it all over when, in the middle of something that they thought was going to go to the end of January.
Late this afternoon, league founder and president Jim Morley called an end to the 1990-91 season. A year and a half after it first stepped to the plate, it appears senior baseball has had its last at-bat.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Holy mackerel. How you doing, folks? What's going on? My name's Tim Hanlon. Indeed, this is Good Seats Still Available. Yes, it is that curious little podcast. That is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. We thank you for coming by. And let's get right into it, shall we? All right, that clip should give you a hint. We're going to go back to a topic that we haven't talked about for a long, long time. The 1.5 year wonder. That was the Senior Professional Baseball Association. Yeah, played in 1989 and 1990. And that little clip that you heard there was from our old pal Ken Tomesh, who was one of our previous guests, episode 39. As a matter of fact, we were talking about his days as the play-by-play man for the Indiana Twisters of the Continental Indoor Soccer League. But prior to that, Ken was a baby cub reporter and anchor in sports for Wink TV down in Fort Myers, Florida. And Fort Myers, indeed, was one of the lucky cities that had a senior professional baseball league team called the Fort Myers Sun Sox. And the date that we spin the Wayback Machine to was December 26, 1990, when not only the Sun Sox folded, but also the league itself after trying to get a second season underway. And what was this SPBA, the Senior Professional Baseball Association? Well, as we'll learn this week and revisit this week with our pal Peter Golenbock, who wrote one of the great books about the short-lived life of the SPBA. And that book is called The Forever Boys. And it came out after the league had actually folded. But you may know Peter Golenbock as a prolific sports writer, especially in the sport of baseball, but not exclusively. This is the guy who helped Sparky Lyle write the explosive book, The Bronx Zoo, back in the late 70s, during the time, 1978, I think, as a matter of fact, when the Yankees were, it was an amazing time to be in New York, the Bronx, World Championships. You had the city of New York crumbling and burning and blackouts and all kinds of stuff. And the Bronx Zoo was, I don't know, it was emblematic, but it was certainly a microcosm, I guess, of the world writ large around New York City and Bronx in particular. He also co-wrote or helped write for Billy Martin his autobiography called Number One. You may remember Peter's quintessential book and his first real sort of debut on the sports writing scene called Dynasty, which was the sort of oral history of the New York Yankees from their time from 1949 through 64. Bums, the oral history of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Personal Fouls, a very controversial book at the time, looking at the championship season and the sort of building of and the maybe demise of North Carolina State basketball, NCAA, and lots of stuff. American Zoom and NASCAR, all kinds of great stuff. Peter Golenbock, look him up. If you haven't read a couple of his works already, I'd be surprised. But we're going to get into the book that he issued in I think it was the spring of 1990, just after this thing called the Senior Professional Baseball Association folded. And it's a great book, Forever Boys. It follows the season, the inaugural season, of a team called the St. Petersburg Pelicans. And they were one of the 8 or so teams. And we'll get into sort of the intricacies of it. There was a first year, and then there was sort of half of a second year and all that stuff. But it's a great conversation. And it's a league and a story that is just, it's too kind of hard to believe. But, what was it? It was the opportunity for players in professional baseball to kind of keep going. The ability to, kind of elongate their careers and frankly give fans some excitement in the process to do so. And for a while, it was not only a great idea, but it was just a fun and just enthralling opportunity to see, I mean, frankly, some of the best players of their day continue to make a go out of it. I mean, you're talking about literally the best players and best known names. And in particular, in the Pelicans, you had guys like Pat Zachary and Bill Spaceman Lee and Ron LaFleur, Jim Rice for a half a season, John Matlock, Doc Ellis. I mean, just an amazing Alan Bannister, all kinds of players, Lenny Randall. I mean, and, you had all kinds of players from Major League Baseball who, frankly, had some gas still in the tank, but also, frankly, were trying to extend their careers or, frankly, just, continuing for the love of the game to play baseball, given a renewed and extended opportunity to do so. And it's a fascinating story. We did certainly talk about the SPBA with our previous conversation with David Whitford, who wrote the book Extra Innings. And we urge you to listen to this podcast in conjunction with that one. You can look that up on goodseatsstillavailable.com or just look it up in your podcast feed. And that was a great conversation. And David and Peter Golenbock were the two guys who kind of are the real chroniclers of this oft-forgotten league known as the Senior Professional Baseball Association. We're going to get into it, if you will, as sort of as a part two of our exploration of that interesting time in that league in 1989 and 1990, briefly. The SPBA with Peter Golenbock, our new pal and a great guest, and a conversation coming up in just a few moments' time. We want to, before getting there, remind you one of our great sponsors is Streaker Sports, and streakersports.com is the place to go. And, of course, they consider themselves, and rightly so, the purveyor of sports culture. That's trademarked. By all means, don't be utilizing that trademark. It's theirs. Streakersports.com, where we've got a promo code for you. It's Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases. Really amazing stuff. It's been a while since we've promoted them on the show, but are you interested in Caddyshack? Well, they've got the Caddy Collection. If you're interested in the 40th anniversary of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team successes, how about some caricature tees? Shirts, that is. Mike Erozione and Jim Craig, they're officially licensed. Fantastic shirts. Give them a try. But, I suspect, in addition to all that kind of stuff and more, you will be enthralled, as we are and continue to be, with their Defunct Leagues collection of shirts. It's probably the most comprehensive and well-crafted collection of shirts devoted to various defunct leagues. And the stuff that we obsess about on this show. And for God's sakes, if you really want to prove your love for the teams of yore that just cannot escape your memories, and you want to remember in classic and beautiful and well-crafted, designed to last T-shirt form, you could do worse by going then to streakersports.com and using that promo code GOODSEATS. We're talking about the ABA. We're talking about the USFL. We're talking about Roller Hockey International, or even Pro Beach Hockey for that matter, if you like the roller version of the hockey. How about WHA, a little more classic ice hockey oriented? They got that too. How about the WFL? You bet they've got shirts devoted to the World Football League. The Major Indoor Lacrosse League, that original version of what is now the NLL, the National Lacrosse League. And of course, perhaps our favorite, but why choose favorites, right? They're kind of like your kids. But maybe amongst the best among equals, the North American Soccer League collection. All of those leagues represented in comprehensive and quality form in great T-shirts. All of yours to choose from the great folks at streakersports.com. Check them out. I guarantee you're going to find something or some things that you're going to absolutely love and you will just not believe exists. We love Streaker Sports and we love you for checking them out. Again, at streakersports.com using the promo code GOODSEATS. GOODSEATS, that's the promo code to get 10% off all of your purchases. We thank Streaker Sports for their sponsorship of said show called Good Seats Still Available. And here we go. Let's get into our chat, our fun conversation with our pal Peter Golenbock as we go back, way back into the 1989 and 1990 half seasons of this thing called the Senior Professional Baseball Association. Here's our conversation, and please, as always, enjoy. Give us a sense of your story leading up to where we're going to get to. You're a law school graduate, of course, but you're a sports writer and prodigious book writer by trade. Maybe you can give our audience a sense of the kinds of stories that you've spent your career focused on.
Well, sure. I mean, how it happened was fairly miraculous to begin with. I was the sports editor of the Daily Dartmouth newspaper at Dartmouth, which was more fun than you could ever imagine. I also managed to write Dartmouth sports for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, which was a lot of fun. So as a student, I was actually getting paid. The New York Times paid me $5 an article, which was a lot of fun. And I went from Dartmouth to NYU Law School. At NYU Law School, I had a classmate by the name of Sally Gold, who had gone to the University of North Dakota. And one of her good friends was a fellow by the name of Phil Jackson. And she introduced me to Phil. And so I sort of, I had gotten credentials to cover New York sports from the Stamford Advocate. I grew up in Stamford. And a friend of mine was a sports editor. So I said to him, look, if you give me credentials to the Knicks, the Rangers, the Yankees, the Mets, all the New York sports, the Jets, I'll give you free articles. I'll write you free articles. And that was the deal. And I did that all through law school. So I got to interview people like Joe Namath and O.J. Simpson. I got to become very close friends with Phil Jackson. I spent a lot of time in Madison Square Garden and at Yankee Stadium. So I graduated from from NYU Law School, and I had a job. My first job was working for Friedman and Fishman in a law firm, and I worked there 6 weeks because they had given me a stack of cases, and my job was to go through the cases and tell them what they had. Well, I discovered that among the cases, 6 of those cases, which was, falling on the sidewalk, there were tort cases. 6 of the 6-year statute of limitations had run, which means they hadn't bothered to look at these things for more than 6 years. And so I took these things to Mr. Friedman, and I said, look, you've got these cases, and I don't know what you're going to do, but the statute of limitations had run. And he said to me, he says, okay, call these guys on the phone, call these people on the phone, tell them why they don't have a case. At which point I said, thank you, sir, I quit. And that was my law career right there. So I then opened up the New York Times, and there was an ad for a writer/lawyer. And I called the number, and it was Prentice Hall in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. And they wanted somebody to write the weekly reports on President Nixon's wage and price controls. This was the summer of 1972. And so I started doing that. And I lasted at that job for 6 weeks. Apparently my job quotient was about 6 weeks, because I discovered that when anybody wanted to raise the prices of things, they found reasons to allow them to do it. But whenever the workers wanted their salaries raised, the Nixon administration figured out ways not to let them do it. So it was kind of to me, it was sort of a scam. And I was sort of writing about this sort of cloaked. Obviously I couldn't be too blatant about it. And my opinions were not what they wanted. They wanted what the rules and regulations were and what they meant. But about 6 weeks into it, I found a catalog of Prentice Hall's trade books. And that included a 1, a 2 by Lawrence Welk. And there was a bank robber who wrote a book, famous bank robber wrote a book, Where the Money Is. This is the name of the title of the book. He was a bank robber. And as a kid, I had become enamored of the New York Yankees. I had read a book called The New York Yankees by Frank Graham as a 12, 13-year-old, and I must have read that book, 20 times. And what I wanted to do, the book was published in either 46 or 48, but when I was growing up as a Yankee fan, from the years 1949 to 1964, which was 16 years, 14 pennants, 9 world championships for the Yankees. So I wanted to write a sequel to The New York Yankees by Frank Graham. So on a whim, I went downstairs and knocked on the door of the head of the trade book division at Prentice Hall. His name, I found out, was Nick Dincheco. And I went to see him, and I pitched him this idea. And he said to me, go and write me a proposal. So one of the things I did is I wrote down during those 16 years how many fans the Yankees had in Yankee Stadium each of those years. And my argument was, if you can sell books to 1% of these fans, you will have a big bestseller. And believe it or not, he bought it. He gave me $2,500 and he said, go write your book. Meanwhile, I had gone to the Yankees. Marty Appel was the assistant PR guy.
Sure.
And I said, do you know Marty?
No, name very familiar to sports fans of yore, for sure, in New York.
Yeah. Well, he was about 12 years old at the time. He was the assistant PR director of the Yankees. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, if you can get a book contract, by all means, we will let you use the files. The Yankees had wonderful, wonderful files to help you write your book. He said, but of course, you'll never get a book contract. That just doesn't happen. Well, I did get a book contract. And when I went to Marty and I told him I had gotten one, he said, fine, come and, use our files and start doing your research. And so from August, September, October, November, December, I'm sitting in Yankee Stadium doing my research and becoming very close to all the people at the Yankees. I mean, this was the Mike Burke Yankees. And these were just the most wonderful, wonderful people and very, very close friends of mine. And so sometimes it was funny. They would go to lunch and the phone would ring and I would pick it up and go, New York Yankees, and take messages for them. I had sort of become part of their family. And they had given me, all sorts of, pushing me to do this thing. At any rate, at the time it came to me to write it, I became convinced that you cannot write a book based on newspaper clippings. So I decided what I ought to do, certainly, is go interview all these people. And Mike Burke wrote me a letter to whom it may concern. Peter Golenbock is writing this book on the Yankees. Please give him your full cooperation. And they gave me the telephone numbers and the addresses of all the Yankees who played from 1949 to 1964. And I went back to Nick Denchico and I said, look, you give me $2,500, but I have to go interview these players. Can you give me $2,500 more? And he did. And I started interviewing these players, and he gave me another $2,500 and another $2,500 till I interviewed the players I needed to interview. And spent a year writing it, and it was Dynasty. The book was Dynasty. The New York Yankees from 1949 to 1964. And it's still in print all these years later.
And a seminal work, and frankly, a hint of what became almost sort of a semi-trademark of yours, sort of the oral history kind of approach.
Well, the thing that I enjoyed most about it was meeting these people and talking to them. An opportunity to have Mickey Mantle tell you about his nightmares. I mean, that's just unbelievable. To have Roger Maris talk about how badly he was treated by Ralph Houck. I mean, who gets a chance to do that? And so obviously, after the success of Dynasty, and I'll get to the Bronx Zoo and number one in a minute, but after the success of Dynasty, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be fun to do this with the Boston Red Sox, the Chicago Cubs, the St. Louis Cardinals and Browns, the New York Mets, and the Dallas Cowboys, for that matter. I did a football book in that vein. And then what happened is that Barnes & Noble, damn Barnes & Noble, started putting its chain of bookstores all across the country, and they started putting out of business the independent bookstores. And see, as long as you had independent bookstores, for instance, I could do a book on the Chicago Cubs. And the 30 independent bookstores would each put 100 books in their bookstore, and I could sell enough books to make it worth their while. But once Barnes & Noble put them all out of business, Barnes & Noble stores each took 2 books. And so no longer could I write team histories because people in California and Florida and Minnesota had no interest in the Chicago Cubs. So I couldn't do that anymore, which was a shame. But we'll go back to Dynasty, going all the way back to Dynasty. After Dynasty, I got a job working for the Bergen Record in Hackensack, New Jersey.
Yes, my hometown newspaper from where I grew up in Bergen County. Yes, unbelievable.
There you go. And my goal, quite frankly, I was going to be a journalist for the rest of my life. That was my goal. Dynasty was wonderful. It was going to be the only book I was ever going to write. But I was going to work for the Bergen Record, and I knew in 2 or 3 years I would end up at the New York Times. That was my ultimate goal. I've always loved the New York Times. And so I was headed in that direction. I was the assistant night news editor at the Bergen Record when I got a call from a fellow by the name of Doug Newton. And Doug Newton was Billy Martin's agent. And I had written in Dynasty that Billy Martin was as important to the Yankees as Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford. So naturally, when Billy Martin wanted to write his autobiography, who did he want to do it? He wanted the guy who said that he was as important as Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford. So that's the thing that changed my life. And then when it turned out that Billy needed a year, waited a year, he wasn't quite ready to do it, Doug Newton had one other client, and that was the relief pitcher, Sparky Lyle. And so he said, do you want to do a book with Sparky? And I said, well, I don't know. Does anybody care about what Sparky has to say? And Doug Newton was smart enough to say to me, look, go down to Fort Lauderdale and meet with Sparky and talk to him. And sure enough, I went down to Fort Lauderdale, and I'm sitting in the clubhouse, the Yankee clubhouse, with Sparky and Greg Nettles and Thurman Munson and Reggie Jackson and Billy Martin, and Steinbrenner's floating around upstairs. And I thought to myself, if Sparky would keep a diary of this 1978 season, we just might have something. And what I didn't know was that Sparky was really sort of angry because the Yankees over the winter had traded for Goose Gossage and given Gossage $2 million. And Sparky was making $140,000, and he had just been the Cy Young Award winner. So we started, Sparky and I, and we wrote about everything that happened and all the experiences that Sparky had and what was going on between Billy Martin and Reggie Jackson and Steinbrenner. And when the thing came out, it was like a bomb. It was like a bomb struck New York.
Oh, it was explosive. I remember growing up as a kid at the time, and it was and a confluence, not only the writing in the book and your ability to convey that story, but also, a tempestuous time not only in the clubhouse but writ large in New York and the Bronx in 1978 and New York City and it just it's a cosmic event of things that
it was cosmic.
It was a match, right? This was a match of other to other explosive things.
Oh my gosh! I said to Sparky, Sparky, I want you to realize when this thing comes out, it's going to be like an atomic bomb. And he said to me, come on, who cares what I have to say? I said, Sparky, just do me a favor, don't duck when it comes out. Well, for about the first 3 days, Sparky ducked. It scared the hell out of him. But eventually he came back, and we must have done TV and radio for the next 3 weeks. And the thing got to be number 2 on the Times bestseller list. The only reason we weren't number 1 was the Scarsdale Diet, which, if you remember, was one of the biggest books that was ever written. But we got to be number 2, and we were on the Times list for about, 16 weeks. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It really was.
So what was it about baseball? Because obviously a lot of your just raft of great work has been focused on various aspects of the sport. I'm a big fan of American Zoom on the NASCAR front. I've had that on my shelf for years. And you've done some other sports and other.
That's a whole other story. That was an amazing thing in and of itself. American Zoom is still the biggest selling NASCAR racing book that was ever written. And how that happened, that's a discussion for another day. NASCAR was so big until Dale Earnhardt was killed in that race in 2001. And then all of a sudden, no publisher would publish a race car book anymore. That's another thing that disappeared, if you've noticed.
Well, it's certainly tragic as we're recording this, given the horrific crash that happened yesterday, the Daytona 500. Yes. But back up, but give me a sense though about baseball, right? Because baseball certainly became somewhat of a specialty of yours, and in particular, first-person narratives, either sort of aiding people in speaking in their own voice and in a literary way, or frankly, oral history just generally. What is it about this sport of baseball? And maybe we'll finally get to the
forever point.
Yeah, but what is it about? Your childhood interest, right, kind of was the spark, but it also became kind of somewhat of a specialty for you, no?
Well, I was born with the baseball gene. I was born with a glove and a bat and a ball. My whole life. And I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, which was a sort of a stone's throw from Yankee Stadium. And I had the opportunity, mostly on television, to listen to, Mel Allen, and watch, all those stars from that dynasty era. Mickey Mantle, You should see what my office looks like. I've got, paintings of Mickey Mantle and a 10-foot, picture of him that used to be on the stadium wall. I've got Mickey Mantle's ads for Mickey Mantle's gloves. I don't know. Yankee fans of a certain era, to those Yankee fans, there was only one, glorious ball player, and that was Mantle. And we just all loved him. We just did. And the other thing, of course, is that every year we won. I mean, how can you get around that? I mean, when you grow up and you know that your baseball team that you love with all your heart is going to win the pennant every year, just about. I mean, you just feel that you're, what do they say? You're standing on third base. You got a spoon in your mouth, but you think you've hit a triple, something like that. I mean, it's just you just feel that you're empowered because of that. And like I said, when I was 13 years old and I read that history of the Yankees, I was just enthralled, absolutely enthralled. And once you get to meet these people and get to know them as people, you love them even more. I went to see, every one of them, Tony Kubek and Bobby Richardson and Clete Boyer. I went to Clete Boyer's sort of redneck bar down in Atlanta. He told me to meet him at 9:00 in the morning at his bar. And I showed up at 9:00, and I'm sitting there drinking coffee while all the ex-high school football players with, various injuries are sitting there drinking beer. And I sat there until basically 9:00 at night. Clete showed up at 9:00 at night. I sat there for 12 hours waiting for him. And he finally showed up, and he showed up with Roger Maris. I mean, it was amazing. It was just amazing. And Roger, I'm sitting with Roger at the table. I had written to Roger. I called Roger. I wanted Roger desperately, and Roger avoided me like the plague. But after about 15 minutes sitting there at the table with Roger, Roger said to me, okay, let's go outside and talk. And he gave me one of the great interviews of the book, of the Dynasty book. And it was one of the last interviews that he gave. He died, I think, in '84. So the experience is just fantastic. So why would one not want to, continue that experience, which I did. I've got 250, 300 tapes of all of these interviews here in my house.
That's amazing. So then let's fast forward to the late '80s then, and maybe the story of how you go from chronicling, teams like, legendary teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and autobiographical explosives like the Bronx Zoo into this experiment, I guess, or this unique sort of thing called the Senior Professional Baseball Association. How does that come about? Is that your idea, somebody else's idea? Give us some of the hows and whats of sort of how something like that gets in your radar.
Life is a very, very funny thing. I mean, going back to Dynasty, what if Nick Dencheco had been a Red Sox fan? Would I have ever gotten a book contract? I don't know. And the same way, one day, I lived in Ridgefield, Connecticut at the time, and one day I went into town to have breakfast, and that day I bought a copy of USA Today, which is something I didn't usually do because I got the New York Times in the mail every day or, on my doorstep. I didn't usually get USA Today, but I did this particular day, and I opened up to the sports section, and there's about a 2-inch column in USA Today, and it talks about a meeting of the owners of the Senior League. The Senior Professional Baseball League are going to meet at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach on such and such a date. And it says the founder of the league, a man by the name of Jim Morley, is looking for ball players. And if you're a ball player who wants to play in the Senior League, call this number. Okay? I got on the phone. I called Morley. I said, look, this sounds really terrific. Guys who are retired, you got to be 35 years old to be in the league. You can't be younger. So these are retired former professional baseball players, and it's like senior golf. It's a chance for them to play again. And I thought, what a fabulous, fabulous opportunity this is going to be for those guys. And I called Morley, and he said, oh, by all means, come on down to our meeting and pick the team you want to, write about. And I did. Down I flew to Palm Beach, went to the meeting. I'm sitting there with all the owners. And at the end of the time, I thought to myself, the team I really want to write about is the West Palm Beach Tropics, which was owned by the current owner of the Red Sox, John Henry. John Henry owned the West Palm Beach Tropics, another guy who just loved baseball. So Dick Williams was going to be their manager. Dave Kingman was the left fielder on the team. He was a star, and they had other stars as well. It was a nice-looking team. So they said, okay, you can do it. And I proceeded to put down $1,000 down payment on a house on Fisher Island near Palm Beach. And I go back to my hotel, and I get a telephone call. And it's the PR guy from the West Palm Beach Tropics. And it turns out he was a friend of Jim Valvano's. And I had written a book called Personal Fouls, which had gotten Valvano fired. So he calls and says, we've changed our mind. We don't want you. We don't want you covering our team. So I'm in a state of panic because I had gotten a contract to write a book about this. And so I called Jim Morley, who was the founder of the league. And Morley said to me, look, I own the St. Pete Pelicans. You're more than welcome to come and write this book about the St. Pete Pelicans. So I went, woof, boy, I'm saved on this one. And so on October 31st, 1989, I drove with wife, 2-year-old son, 2 dogs to St. Petersburg, Florida. And I'm driving across the Bayway, and there is the beautiful Don Cesar Hotel. And the sun is going down, and it's 75 degrees. And I thought to myself, my gosh, this must be what heaven is like. And so the next day, I went to the clubhouse where the St. Pete Pelicans were meeting. And Bobby Tolan, who was the manager, he says, Peter, we have a problem. Oh, boy, what's the problem? So I sit down, and Tolan begins to tell me that the players are really not sure they want to have some guy hanging around them, nosing into their business, reporting on what they're doing. And Doc Ellis, who's about 6'6", this wonderful character who became a very close friend of mine, he's walking around my chair and he's chanting, loser writer, loser writer, loser writer. So he's trying to rattle me, but he can't rattle me because I have a job to do, which is to convince these guys to let me stay. So Tolan says, I'll tell you what, we're going to have a team meeting. You come out and you tell them what you're doing and see if they'll let you stay. So I went out there with all these former Major League Baseball players, and I proceeded to tell them exactly how I felt, which was the fact that this was their opportunity to play the game they loved again. And that's what this book is going to be about, the love of the game and just, your life stories. And I told them, if anybody wants to see what I'm writing about you, you're more than welcome. And at the end of the meeting, nobody said a word. So I'm thinking to myself, should I get on the bus tomorrow? Am I okay? Well, I didn't have any choice. If you're going to do this, you're going to get on the bus. Our first game was in Winter Haven against the Winter Haven Super Sox. And I packed my suitcase with my tape recorder and my notes and so forth and so on. And I got on the bus, and nobody said a word. It was like, hello, 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 hello. I sat in the back of the bus, and we went to New Haven, and these fellas and I became very, very close over the next 3-4 months. And we won the one and only Senior Professional League Championship.
All right, what's this? The Arizona Office of Tourism spring training. Oh my God. Hey, this spring, follow your favorite baseball teams to Arizona for Cactus League spring training. Amazing weather and landscapes, exciting outdoor adventure, incredible food. Arizona. It's the perfect home base for baseball fans. Follow your favorite baseball teams to Arizona for Cactus League spring training. 10 stadiums, 15 Major League Baseball teams, and 75-degree temperatures. Awesome. And all 10 stadiums are in the greater Phoenix area, all within 50 miles of the city. Meet players, get autographs before the games, and just enjoy an old-fashioned ballpark experience in beautiful preseason weather down in Arizona. Check out amazing restaurants and bars nearby, including tons of craft breweries like Four Peaks, Angel's Trumpet Ale House, and Goldwater Brewing Company. Enjoy live music from local and national artists, and explore museums featuring everything from native heritage to modern art to musical instruments from around the world and more. Arizona is known for its incredible landscapes too, as well as thrilling outdoor adventures. So hit the road and explore Arizona's urban centers or ghost towns or artsy communities or quirky outposts. You can hike, you can bike, you can take Jeep tours, hot air balloon rides, skydiving, jet skiing, or just taking in a good old-fashioned sunset. No matter what you love to do, Arizona has you covered. Check out must-see destinations from your bucket list like the Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Horseshoe Bend, and even the great Old West city of Tucson. Bringing the kids along for spring training? Hey, Arizona's a fantastic destination for families, too. Family-friendly resorts and hotels offer plenty of fun for kids of all ages, from water parks to horseback rides to games and activities. Arizona also has tons of stuff for kids to do and see, like wildlife parks and science museums, aquariums, and even dude ranches. So what are you waiting for? Plan now for your spring training getaway at visitarizona.com/spring training. That's visitarizona.com/spring training. Hey, and don't forget, send us a postcard. With that premise, right, is that what unfolded as the season went on? That sort of noble last chance to tell your story, the love of the game, it didn't fully turn out that way in terms of what you produced as a book, right? There was some dark and not so happy sort of thoughts in there too.
Well, again, it comes down to interviewing people, and they saw that I had a genuine interest in their lives. And whatever's in that book is what they told me. It wasn't anything that I dug up. This was all material that they told me as I interviewed them. I interviewed almost every one of these players for an hour, hour and a half, sometimes two. And they were very open and honest and wonderful.
And give just for our audience, give us some of the names. These are some legendary names of the 70s and 80s that were now on this team.
Well, without a doubt. I mean, the most valuable player in the league was Stevie Henderson, who had been with the Mets. Yeah, Ivan de Jesus was a star player. I'll tell you about Butch Menton in a minute. Kenny Landreau was our center fielder. We had both Racich brothers, Dave Racich. Gary was the first baseman. Dave was the pitcher. We had Steve Kemp, who was with the Yankees and other teams. Bobby Tolan was our manager. Pat Zachary, who had pitched for Texas, a wonderful guy who became a good friend. Lamar Johnson, Dick Bosman, who had pitched a no-hitter for the Oakland A's, pitched for the Washington Senators. Randy Lurch, who was a Philadelphia Philly for a while. One of our catchers was Dwight Lowry. Milt Wilcox, who was a fabulous pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. Doc Ellis, of course. Roy Howell, who was a star third baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays. John Matlack, who was a star for the Mets, had been a star for the Mets. Catcher, we had Ozzie Virgil Jr. as well. I mean, it turned out that Bobby Tolan, who was a wonderful, wonderful manager, what he wanted to do was win. See, there were other teams, for instance, the Winter Haven Super Sox. The owner of Winter Haven decided that what he wanted to do was collect old Boston Red Sox players. Winter Haven had always been the Red Sox spring training place. So he thought if he got old Red Sox they would draw a lot of fans that way. The problem was a lot of those Boston Red Sox players were too old. So they really couldn't compete against the young guys that the St. Pete Pelicans and the West Palm Beach Tropics had. The same thing with the Mets team. The Mets team was in St. Lucie. They had a lot of Mets, but some of those Mets players were 50 years old, and they just couldn't play. Tolan wanted talent. He wanted young talent, and he and Doc Ellis accumulated this young talent, and put together quite a terrific team.
Including, by the way, a key Red Sox player, Jim Rice.
The second year.
The second
year they had Rice, and the shame of it was in the middle of the second year, on Christmas Day, the league folded.
Right.
In the first year, at the end of the season, towards the end of the season, the owner of the Orlando team disappeared. He had stolen $13 million from the Detroit mob, and he disappeared, which put a financial burden on the rest of the team. And then the second year, I guess it was Christmas Day, the team from Fort Myers had two owners. One of the owners, the very wealthy family from Delaware.
Not the DuPont.
Yes.
There you
DuPont. Yeah, DuPont. One of them was a DuPont, and the other one was a Coke addict. And the DuPont discovered that the Coke. Yeah, well, he discovered that the other guy was putting Coke up his nose and costing him a lot of money. And at that point, he said, "I'm done. I quit." And at the point he said that, the league could not survive, and it was over, which was a damn shame because it was wonderful. The problem that they had, at least the way I understood it, was that with 8 teams in Florida, you apparently couldn't get national sponsors. Because it was only played in one state. It was only played in Florida. So the second year, they decided to move one of the teams to California and move one of the other teams to Arizona to make it a national team so that they could get more national sponsors. But unfortunately, once that Fort Myers team folded, the airfare was too expensive, and the whole thing just collapsed, which was a shame. Because the league was wonderful. It really was. It was better than AAA quality baseball. And the other thing that was so wonderful about it is it gave these guys the opportunity to resume the life that they loved so much.
But it also came with, and as you elegantly recount it in this book, it also comes with some really, searing understanding, I guess, of what one sacrifices for the love of the game, frankly, for extending one's career, right? Arguably not at the same sort of level of adoration nor certainly compensation. There are sacrifices that come with that, right? And to continue versus, say, moving on with your life per se, or extending one's career in the twilight. I mean, for every, wonderful moment or two, I got to think there was also a bit of wistfulness. And frankly, the body's not necessarily keeping up with the demands of the game either, right?
Well, because everybody was playing under the same rules, which is to say you had to be older than 35, some people, the younger ones especially, did very, very well. If you were 50 years old, you were not going to do very well, and you were not going to last very long. And some of these team owners discovered that very quickly, that this, I had the sense with the Red Sox, for instance, they made Bill Lee the manager, at least for the first week. And he was pitching, and he was playing a little right field, and he was fooling around with the lineup. Well, the St. Pete Pelicans were dead serious about winning games. I mean, dead serious. And very quickly, all those, team owners who thought that this was a lark very quickly figured out that this wasn't a lark. This was serious baseball. And that was neat to see. It was. I mean, professional baseball players are very, very interesting people, not only physically, of course, but psychologically as well. you've got to be tough as a son of a gun to be able to play a major league in the major leagues. Very, very special people end up in the major leagues.
Well, how did all those players feel sort of rekindling that? I mean, did they feel like this was sort of Major League Junior or
No.
Okay.
Not at all. No. This was the best that they could do. This was back to playing against other major leaguers again. This was a big deal. And they just had a wonderful, wonderful time doing it. They were thrilled to be able to do it. I mean, as you saw in the book, there were a couple of guys who had problems emotionally. A couple of them had drug problems, that certain things in your lives that you just can't control. But, I mean, it's interesting. If you watch major leaguers, you saw a fellow yesterday. I can't remember what team he was from, but he's suspended for 80 games for taking steroids. I mean, certain guys just get in trouble. And we had guys like that too.
Give me a sense of sort of the day-to-day, right? So you're traveling across Florida. I'm guessing a lot of bus travel and accommodations maybe not sort of being sort of the highest level. And frankly, how about the fans and how many fans and what was the spirit of in the game, in the stadiums and whatnot? I mean, because this is no doubt a curiosity as much as it is an extension of being able to play baseball at a pro level.
Yeah, but as the season went along, it was 4 months. As the season went along, the interest built. We were taking the best buses available. We were staying in the best hotels available on the road. This was not a nickel and dime operation, and some of these guys were getting very good money. At least the first year they were. But more than the money, it was the opportunity to compete against the major leaguers again. And in St. Petersburg, we were, I think we were averaging 800, 900 people a game, something like that. And as the season went along, as I was the radio guy, I was one of the two radio guys. Jack Weirs, who had been the play-by-play broadcaster for the Baltimore Orioles, he was paid to do the play-by-play. And I, who was so grateful just to have the opportunity to be with these guys, during the games, I was the color commentator on the radio shows. And from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night on the radio, we had the highest rated show in all of Tampa Bay. We had a lot of listeners. And the fans loved us. They just did. And I'm sure that was true in the other towns as well. There was some very, very, if the temperature was right and if it was a weekend, for instance, we got very good crowds.
Give me a sense, though, of the finances and because I can't imagine it was simply the Orlando owner situation that sort of, imploded the whole thing. I mean, you're mentioning expansion and all that kind of stuff, right? Revenues and when did you sort of see that, this might not necessarily last for a long period of time, or did you not even sense that as you were sort of focusing on this story and this team?
I was whacked on the head with an oar, the same as all the players on the day they announced that the thing was folding. We had no idea, no clue at all. It was out of the blue. It was terrible.
Interesting.
Christmas.
And no real sense of it, right? I mean, the fact that they were...
No, none at all. Don't forget, all the owners of all these teams were very wealthy men. I mean, look at John Henry. John Henry's a billionaire right now. He was the owner of the West Palm Beach Tropics. See, the one thing Jim Morley didn't want to do, Morley and I became close, so we talked a lot too. He was afraid that if he got too rich in ownership, that if 4 or 5 of them got together, they could somehow take the league away from him because he was not wealthy. He didn't have to pay for his franchise. He had enough money to run it, but he was not as wealthy as some of the other guys who were involved. In fact, he had sold a piece of his team at the end of the first year to a fellow from Texas, but they didn't have enough money to last once the Orlando guy went under and the Fort Myers guy quit. They just couldn't see to go from there. I don't know the details of it. I just was with the players, like everybody else when the announcement came. No game today. Everybody go home.
Give me a sense of what the players felt when that happened.
They felt the same thing I felt. It was a stunning announcement. It's like, what the, And then at that point, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. I believe they gave the players the money to fly home.
Well, in some respect, though, it also you said whack by like a 2x4 or an oar to the head.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is that really is a reality check, because all of a sudden, this potential extension of one's career in this senior league is gone and literally not coming back. I got to think it's devastating to players, especially those who knew nothing more than the sport of baseball for most of their adult lives.
Well, it's interesting. The Tampa Bay Rays had a 20th anniversary reunion at the Trop, where they invited all of us back. And we were just so thrilled to see each other. Some of them had become coaches. Dick Bosman had become a coach with the Rays, a pitching coach. Some of the others had become coaches. We had a catcher by the name of Butch Benton, who had been number one draft choice of the New York Mets. And he had gotten hurt and never, ever made it to the Mets. But here was this kid. He was still, just 35 years old. He wasn't very old. He was spectacular. He was a star. And after the season was over, he got an opportunity to catch with the Chicago Cubs in AAA. But unfortunately, Major League Baseball didn't embrace the Senior League. They had made the mistake of making Curt Flood the commissioner. And Curt Flood, of course, was the guy who sued baseball. So it seemed to me, I have no proof, but it just seemed to me that Major League Baseball decided none of these guys who played in the Senior League will ever play in the majors, even though some of them deserve to. Butch Benton was one of them. It would have been great if they had brought Butch Benton up to the majors just so that he could be able to say to his 8 children, I'm a Major League ball player. But they didn't.
Yet, in many respects, right, giving Curt Flood that job, right, was frankly a testament to his will and what he was able to achieve, right? Obviously, longer term in retrospect, obviously, but
well, that certainly was one way to look at it. I mean, he was a name, and I guess Morley wanted a name, and Curt Flood was somebody who had agreed to do it. But it was not smart. What they needed was the backing of Major League Baseball. If they had had the backing of Major League Baseball, that league might have survived, maybe.
So in retrospect, why do you think that this idea hasn't come back since?
I don't know. It's very interesting, because you notice that the XFL has come back. Except the first time, of course, Trump submarined that by taking that whole league and going from the spring to compete directly against the NFL, which is the stupidest damn thing in the world, which ultimately made it fail. Why hasn't it happened? I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You wonder, right? Because especially in this era of niche sports, right, and programming and cable, yep, and streaming and all that kind of stuff, you could make the argument that the economics are, relatively straightforward and possibly doable today. And arguably the Major League Baseball might find that, there's, I don't know, we talked about this.
I don't think Major League Baseball wanted the Senior League competing, for fans, money. I don't think they wanted competition from these guys. And I think the other reason it doesn't exist today is because back then, if the players were making, a couple $100,000, they would be more than willing to come to the Senior League and take, say $7,000 a month for 4 months. Guys are now making $20 million a year, $4 million a year, $10 million a year. They don't need the money. They don't need to do it.
No, I guess I'm thinking more of the players that are aging out of the game. I mean, you talk about the XFL, right? That's a spring league, right, which is out of NFL season, right? So in the off season, right, if Major League Baseball is looking for new revenues, right, you could, I don't know, you're extending baseball as a sport. It is something to go see and enjoy in the off season. Yep. You could commingle it perhaps with fantasy camp stuff, right? Where it's it's almost experiential that goes beyond. You throw it out there.
It depends. It depends what kind of league you want. Some of these teams thought they were going to be a fantasy camp like. They invited all the guys from the fantasy camps to come. Hey, let's go play ball, and they got clobbered. They just got clobbered. The teams that set it up as professional baseball teams out to, beat all the other teams, they won. So you got to decide, what's the league going to be like? And my suspicion is that in this senior league of 1989-90, we had stars. We had John Matlack, we had Doc Ellis. I mean, we had some great players in this league. Every team had them. I don't think now, today's great players who would be making, say $15 million a year, and who at the end of their careers have, $75 million in the bank, would want to come and play in November, December, January, and February for $5,000 a month.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about an era, even seemingly not too distant, right? Is the pro sports is just of a certain higher level and order of magnitude.
I hate to tell you.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you. That was 31 years ago.
Yeah, but still, 31 years ago for sure. But in that seemingly short period of time, right, or long period of time, the business of pro sports is just it's on an exponentially different level now, right? And I think you're kind of hinting at it as to why maybe this idea, perhaps it was exquisitely timed and maybe too short-lived. But
both of those back. Yep. It was amazingly successful, and I was really upset when they decided to screw with it. When they decided they wanted a team in Arizona and they wanted a team in California. Now, maybe the economics demanded that. I don't know. I wasn't privy to any of that. But once they did that, it created serious financial problems. It really did.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. So when did the book itself come out? Had the league basically died before the book came out, or did it come out when it was six seasons underway? Okay. So it became almost an epitaph then for
it was
unwittingly, right?
It was. If the league hadn't folded Christmas Day, if the league had continued through to February, say, that book came out in March. So it would have been, a tribute to an existing league, but it didn't work out that way. It just so happened that it folded Christmas Day of 1990. And the book came out, 1991. It came out in 1991 in March.
Yeah, so, not to get too publisher insider, but did it help or hurt the book? And frankly, what was also the reaction of people reading and seeing in the book? Positive, negative, or just had people kind of lost interest, or was it truly kind of a dancing on a grave kind of feeling, I guess?
It was all of those. It was all of those things. Absolutely all of those things. The people who love baseball and love the stories, love the book. The people who sort of laughed at the senior league, which was a lot of the New York writers who came down the first couple of weeks. And of course, in the first couple of weeks, a lot of these players hadn't played in several years, and so they pulled leg muscles, and they were not at the top of their game. And these New Yorkers came down and sort of ripped the thing to shreds. Who wants to watch a bunch of old men, which was really sort of rotten. We resented them terribly for it. And the book did okay. I could it have done better had the league survived, probably. But it didn't work out that way.
Is there any lasting sort of memory and or story within all of this now, especially as you have 31 plus years now and in hindsight, besides sort of some nice memories and a bit of wistfulness? I mean, was there any sort of lesson either about life and baseball generally, or about the league and how maybe to or not to run a league or approach it, or any lessons that that you've sort of gleaned from this interesting little footnote in pro sports history that you happen to be literally in the midst of for a season?
What I took from it more than anything else was the love these people had for the game and the love they had for their team. We were a very, very tight-knit group who all came to appreciate each other. These were guys, they all came from different teams. Lenny Randall, who's this wonderful, wonderful guy. He was one of the leaders of our team. And we would have, meetings on the bus where they would all get together. And I had the opportunity to record a few of these meetings where, they would laugh and talk, and it was like a family. A good baseball team is like a family. I mean, I still play softball here in St. Petersburg. We have something called the Half Century League. This is my 25th year. It's a league that goes from age 49 to 75. And we have a 60-game schedule. We play 60 games a year. And you see these guys, we play 3 games a week, and guys get close. I mean, it's just something about baseball that way, which is just, baseball is not a sport. Baseball is really a religion. It really is. It's very, very important. And all these guys who played for the St. Petersburg Pelicans, to them, it was their whole lives. And I could see that. I felt the same way.
All right, well, let me ask you one sort of last sort of roundup question, and I think you're exquisitely positioned to answer it. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
you can put me on the spot. I don't care.
All right, well, we'll do that then. So, what of baseball in its current state? Have we maximized the amount of teams? Is obviously we're now, as we record this, sort of embroiled in the fiasco of the Houston Astros and all that kind of stuff, and we talked about big business and big bucks and all of that in pro sports, and I don't know, it in some respects,
pro sports right now are quaking in their boots. Everybody's scared to death, including Major League Baseball, and they're scared to death because so many of these people who are 30 years old and under don't care about competitive sports. They don't care about baseball. They don't care about football. They don't care about hockey. They don't care about basketball. What they care about are video games. You see 25,000 people in Madison Square Garden watching 4 people fighting it out to be the video game champion of, something warfare, whatever that game is about warfare. I mean, these are millionaires. These kids are millionaires, 19-year-old millionaires, because they're fabulous video game players. And if you look in to see who is coming to Major League Baseball games, you do not see very many people who are under the age of 30. I mean, it's amazing. Most of the people in the stands at the Trop are 50, 60, 70, 75. These are people who have loved baseball their whole lives and cherish it and come to see it. Baseball doesn't know what to do about the fact that they're not getting the youth. They just don't know. No team does. And that's the thing in the future. You keep an eye on that. I mean, teams are doing everything they can to try to draw young fans. They may be able to get the 10-year-olds. The question is, can they get the 20-year-olds? That's going to be the difficulty.
And the idea specifically of the Rays splitting time in Montreal and that, what are your thoughts on that?
Good luck.
Yeah, I mean,
Good luck.
You
want to do that? You want to do that? Fine. You want to do that? You want to pay for 2 stadiums That way you'll have two. You'll have Montreal fans and Tampa Bay fans. If you think you can do that, go ahead and do it. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I have been so fortunate. I've lived here, after the Senior League, I continued to live here. I've lived here since 1990. The Rays started playing in 1998. They were the Devil Rays. And they were terrible. But to have Major League Baseball in St. Petersburg, Florida, was a blessing. I didn't care if they won or they lost. My friend Ray Arsenault, who's a professor here at USF, we would go to all the games. We would, sit and watch the games. We didn't care if they won or lost. In a sense, we still don't care if they won or they lost. But, we just always had the feeling that the ownership didn't much care for the fans. I don't know why that was. The first owner, he was really terrible. This owner, Stu Sternberg, is much better. But this is a guy who's always griping about attendance. The guy's got $3 billion, and he's got a fabulous TV and radio deal. I think they're the 8th biggest listenership and watch, TV viewership in the country of all the teams. And they're still, bitching and moaning that they're not getting enough fans to come to the games in St. Petersburg, and so they want to put their team in Tampa. So how does it make the St. Petersburg fans feel? Like, they don't want us. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, attendance is an issue in pro sports generally as well, right? As people stay home and the big screens and all that kind of stuff. So there are some bigger issues there too, beyond just Tampa, St. Pete, and baseball in particular. Let me ask you one sort of final question. So what fuels you? And you have just a litany of books. I mean, a literal library of amazing stories and great writings and stuff. And I take it you're still going strong. What motivates you to continue to? Is it the stories? Is it the people? Is it the sport itself? What are the things that kind of have motivated you through your career to be so prodigious with all your great work, such as this one?
Boy, that is a very, very good question. I think more than anything else is that I honestly am not capable of doing anything else. I think this is the only thing I know how to do. Does that make any sense at all?
No, there's something to be said for that. And and when you feel it's the only thing you get really, really good at it. And then, God forbid, people enjoy what you do and are willing to pay a little princely sum for what you do. And that to me sounds like kind of perfection, I guess, when it comes to a career.
I've had, they talk about being blessed. I'm not a religious guy in any stretch of the imagination, but I've had an amazing life. I really have. And I've never, ever, ever taken that for granted. Never. Who would have guessed this sports editor of the Dartmouth would have ended up with, 60 books on his shelf? I don't know. I sometimes wonder. I'm looking at the books right now. I wonder, how the hell did that happen?
Well, okie dokie. There we go. A great discussion, a great conversation. Peter and I could have gone on for weeks talking about this topic. And the good news is that Peter's got a whole bunch of books that gives us further excuses to hopefully have him back on the show. He's a prolific sports writer, and we will have a link to a little sort of mini section of all the great books that he has out there. But we want to at least give you sort of the starter kit. And that is the book that we kind of talked about today around the Senior Professional Baseball Association. The book is called The Forever Boys, The Bittersweet World of Major League Baseball as Seen Through the Eyes of the Men Who Played One More Time. Now, you can get the original version sort of floating around out there. We'll have a link to that in hardcover from the original Birch Lane Press, but you may frankly enjoy the more reissued and modern version that is published not only in paperback form, It's a little lighter to carry around, especially on the beach as you're roaming around, see on spring break perhaps, or maybe coming up this summer. It's published by Summer Game Books, and we'll have a direct link for that as well on our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, and just search up this episode with Peter Golenbock and you'll find it. And we'll also give you a gateway to a whole bunch of some of his other books. Again, The Bronx Zoo with Sparky Lyle, Number One with Billy Martin, A Dynasty, The Oral History of the New York Yankees from 49 to 64, The Oral History of the Brooklyn Dodgers called Bums, on and on and on. Just an amazing array. American Zoom for you NASCAR fans, and all kinds of other stuff. Peter Golenbock is a treasure trove of great writing, and hopefully, if you've never read anything from Peter before, Forever Boys will be a tremendous entree for you and a nice little supplement to this conversation. But hopefully it'll also be a gateway drug, shall we say, for lots of the other great stuff that Peter has written and probably will continue to write. And we look forward to having Peter back on this show. Gosh, we could talk about the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's an excuse. We'd like to talk about the St. Louis Browns, which we really haven't done yet. He's got a book that sort of combines sort of the histories of both the Browns and the St. Louis Cardinals. So many other excuses to bring Peter back, and we look forward to doing just that. Let's see. Before we run, we want to remind you, as always, you can send us an email if you'd like. Do you like the show? Do you have suggestions for other guests, other leagues, teams, things we just haven't touched on yet that you're chafing at hearing more about? By all means, send us an email at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. We are more than happy, and we love when we get email and from all over the globe. It's amazing where we get listeners from. I just found out we had our first few listeners from Chile just last week. So we welcome the South American continent to the growing legion of Good Seats Still Available listeners. Let's see. If you want to follow us on social media, of course, we've got you covered there. On Twitter, you'll find us at Good Seats Still. You will find us at on Instagram, of course, at Good Seats Still Available. And you will also find a Facebook page devoted to us as well. We like to post a whole bunch of images and stuff for each week's show and all that kind of stuff. And we also like to send an email newsletter to you if you want to subscribe to that. Just go to the website and find the link for the newsletter. It's very easy to do. And we'll send you a little note on Saturday or Sunday each week, a little bit, a little advance notice as to what's coming up in this week's episode. And frankly, you get a little bit of an early link to listen to it before the hoi polloi on the regular RSS feed there. So by all means, do that. And let's see what else. Oh, we of course want to say thank you. They're not yelling boo. They're yelling Jerry. Jerry. Of course, that's Jerry Payne, the good doctor, down in metropolitan Atlanta. And he is our producer extraordinaire. We, of course, cannot do this show without him. And we, of course, tip this week's baseball cap in Jerry's general direction. Thank you, kind sir. All right. We thank you, kind ladies and gentlemen, for listening once again to our crazy little show, our little obsession into what used to be in professional sports. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. And until then, we bid you a fond adieu. Take care, everybody.